afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of Level Up Cyber. My name is Tony Bryan, your host and the Executive Director of CyberUp. Really been looking forward to this conversation today. Jessica and I have met each other over the last couple of years through LinkedIn interactions, which makes this a great timely conversation because we're going to dive into that idea of way to leverage and use LinkedIn as a tool to extend your reach for jobs beyond applicant tracking systems and some best practices to really make that happen. So Jessica comes with a wealth of experience through years of recruiting and supporting candidates. So we're going to share today a little bit of those best practices. So excited about the conversation, and I want to be the first to welcome you to the show, Jessica. But as we get started, I'd love to have you take a second, introduce who you are, where you work, and how you got to where you're at today. That would be great.
Absolutely. And Tony, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this podcast. I'm really excited to just share what I know. So yes, I am Jessica Cassidy, and I am the practice lead for OP Cyber Talent. And, how I got into really just recruiting in general was I found myself in a position where I was a business analyst. And so this was back in 2005, where I was a business analyst and found myself getting more and more technical and working with a lot more, technical folks such as developers, QA, managers, the whole gamut. And so as I found myself being in a role that was more fingers on the keyboard, I realized, okay, I really like the relationship aspect. I like the understanding and identifying pain points aspect of the role, but I didn't want to code. I didn't want to get really more into like the code reviews or anything like that. Just my mind doesn't work that way. I like to hear about it, but I don't necessarily want to do it. So as I found myself, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? I got into recruiting, and I started out with an agency, just doing some baseline recruiting for accounting and finance. And 6 months later, a former coworker of mine said, hey, DST Systems has a technical recruiter position open. And so that was in 2006. And I became a technical recruiter, corporate recruiter for that organization until 2011. Where I just focused on software engineers, QA, all the folks that I had worked with. I knew what made a great engineer or a great QA person or, whatever the technical role was by working side by side. So I leveraged that experience into becoming a technical recruiter. So fast forward, moved on from DST where I joined OP and became a internal recruiter for a couple organizations where it was more strategic. We would go in, identify their first, 50 or 100 so hires, implement their best practices for recruiting, ATS, all that good stuff. And that was great. It was super rewarding because a lot of those companies then were able to build and scale quickly, and then eventually either, get acquired or go public. And so did that for a while. And then the opportunity came for me to join a cybersecurity firm here in Kansas City. And that was Fish Tech Group. So I joined Fish Tech Group in January of 2019 and really focused on all things security. So whether it was identity, GRC, SOC, security engineering, the development behind the actual technology and tools, and was there for about 5 years. So when it came to the point of my current employer, OP, Objective Partners, to start the recruiting practice for all things cybersecurity, I was very excited to do so. So we started OP Cyber Talent in April of 2023 and have had some really great quick success just due to the relationships that I was able to leverage from former experience and then also just working for a quality company. So I've been in technical recruiting, and I think I've touched anything technical from entry-level help desk all the way up to a CISO, and all different areas of security since about 2006.
So you've seen a lot of different best
Smell.
practices, you've seen a lot of careers and paths. And so what is, let's say, I'm going to segment this by entry, mid, senior. Just, I know a lot of our audience since entry. So, if
Yeah.
I'm an entry level person, I just a college graduate, I just finished my program, I'm trying to break in, right? And I've been told network, LinkedIn, find mentors. What can I do on my LinkedIn profile to really help stand out and show my talents and maybe highlight that, or so that way, as the Jessicas of the world are finding crops of people to bring into
Mhm.
roles, that I would stand out to you for that profile. What would be some good advice there?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Tony. So I always suggest to in your summary, the about me, you really want to talk about what you're passionate about, why you're interested in cybersecurity as a whole, and really leverage your interest because there's so many different areas within cybersecurity. I mean, you've got identity, you've got risk and compliance, and then you've got security engineering. There's a sales aspect, there's a sales engineering aspect, there's all different levels. So you really want to be very clear with the type of role, why that role or that opportunity or kind of dream job really speaks to you, and then what are you doing to enhance your knowledge? Where are you going to practice that craft, if you will? Is it home labs? Is it taking the tests in order to get your certifications maybe on your own, or maybe you're getting that through a boot camp or your 2-year 4-year program? You really want to be able to stress what you're doing on your own, what you're reading, what you're following, and how you're actively practicing your skills.
Some really good advice from the same question. How would you translate that to maybe a mid tier, right? I'm trying to make that leap from, let's say I've been doing help desk for a
Mhm.
year or two, and I'm trying to make that transition from a help desk or service desk role to a more security role.
Yep.
What are some things that I could do, maybe from a training perspective or even from a LinkedIn perspective? And I know I have a question I want to ask you about truthfulness in some of this, right? But I
Mhm.
also want to lean into the idea of, what's a good way to position myself
Yep.
outwardly to make that transition into a more technical cyber role.
Yeah. So, and I've seen this a lot where somebody's going from maybe either the help desk or like a systems engineering or systems admin type background and wanting to get into cybersecurity or a more security specific type role. In your summary, you do have the opportunity then to talk about, okay, this is what I've learned. This is the gap or the pain point that I'm seeing day in, day out. And this is how I feel that my experience then can leverage into that type of role. So if it's a security analyst type role, or and typically it's going to be a security analyst type role. Let's just use that for the example. What you're doing in your current day that lends well because you've seen it in the job descriptions, or you have friends that are in that role. What are you doing in your current role that that's going to be an easy transition and really highlight those skills? So it may be, especially with the help desk, you're answering phone calls or tickets. How do you know that's the right person? How do you know it's not phishing? How do you know somebody's not trying to scam you to get information? From a help desk perspective, you have to put that security hat on in order to understand that this information is, this person needs to reset their password. Okay, well, we all know that that's a lot of the times that how organizations can have some sort of incident. So the help desk systems admin type roles, they really have to put on that security hat in order to navigate their day to day, same as a security analyst or security engineer. So it's very intertwined. So in that same note, if you are in a position where maybe you have a couple years of experience in help desk or systems administration, you can also utilize LinkedIn to understand other people's career paths,
Mhm.
or reaching out to folks of who you want to be when, if you identify somebody and you're like, they're in my dream job. use LinkedIn to pick their brain. How did they do it? How did they make the transition? So not only are you setting yourself up from your profile perspective, but you need to use LinkedIn as that networking, fact finding, career networking tool.
Yeah, I have two, this job is a direct relation to a friend and a contact on LinkedIn who had a friend who had a friend and interviewed, right? So it is a really powerful tool to leverage and build that network. But it can also, I think, be a little bit overwhelming for somebody who's trying to figure out the ins and outs and how to write those things in a way that does position you, right? And there's
Yep.
always yeah, I got another question, but we never covered the senior, right? So we hit the senior roles because your profiles look different, right? Like if I
Right.
put myself in, somebody in that 7 to 10 year mark that's debating, do I want to go CISO? Do I want to go individual contributor, right? Like those are different paths you alluded to earlier, paths that somebody can take.
Mm-hmm.
Are
Absolutely.
there different ways in which I'm presenting myself and packaging my kind of content I share to really position myself better for one of those opportunities? Or what would be a good advice for that for you?
Yeah. When you're in kind of your mid-level career and you're wanting to get to that next level, whether it be a management, security leadership role, or maybe even you want to start your own thing and start your own security consulting organization. What you'll want to do is, and it's not really LinkedIn at this point, it's going to be those user groups. It's going to be those specific security user groups that you want to become a part of. So again, identifying, from a security management perspective, it might be like the Cloud Security Alliance. It might be ISSA. There's so many different professional development networking groups and educational groups that you'll want to become a part of, because then you will be working with those folks that are either in that future opportunity that you either want to become, and then again you get to be in the same space and learn from those people, or certainly those groups are just going to continue talking about what are the emerging threats, the trends, and you're always a constant learner. So I would say, outside of LinkedIn, it's really going to be those professional user groups specific to that security topic.
Yeah. We talked a little bit prior to hopping on that this is a space where it's highly competitive right now
Mhm.
for the job market, and there's probably a lot of people that are out trying to just mass apply, right, and
Right.
put resumes in and some different things, which has a tendency oftentimes where there could be some uh, amplification of maybe skills and things that somebody can do, right? I always
Yeah.
think of you know, hey, do you have Splunk experience? And somebody says yes, because they turned on Splunk a year
Right.
ago in a class they took in
Oh, they read about
college. Correct. That doesn't
it.
mean
Yeah.
Splunk is part of it, right? So, are there some tips and tricks or ways to try to articulate those things in a better way to make sure that you're not overstating or over
Yes. Yeah.
what would you recommend to make sure that whatever I'm saying I can do is aligned with my actual true skill set to highlight that?
Yeah, absolutely. And typically these, the candidates that are looking for a new opportunity, they are applying to many different organizations, many different roles that also have different descriptors, right? So there's different qualifications and requirements. First and foremost, you do not want to embellish anything on your resume. You really have to be truthful. If you have read about it, you don't necessarily want to put that on your resume. You want to talk, or you want to display truthfully what you can honestly and actually do day one. You can walk into an environment day one and start actively participating in. So you don't want to have other keywords on your resume that don't reflect your actual experience. Then what you want to do is, once you've applied to the position, you're going to want to try to connect with the recruiter. You're going to want to try to find out who you can find out who is on that team. Maybe there's a security engineer, security analyst, or whatever that person may be, and start connecting with them and say, I would love to have this opportunity. This is why I would be so great at this role. I know that really stood out for me as an internal recruiter, where folks would reach out to me outside of the ATS, or they would try to find a creative way to get in front of somebody on that team or organization just outside of the ATS. And you can certainly do that in a couple different ways, but LinkedIn is great for that. Or adding in your objective, again, really stating your passion. If you have even maybe a portfolio or a sample that you can share. I know folks have done that as part of their resumes. And then again, really listing out their tailoring. Let me pause for a moment. There could be opportunities where you have one security engineer role that's going to differ from another security engineer role. So you want to tailor your experience to that job description, but truthfully. You don't want to necessarily have two different resumes that have differentiation on experience, but you can always tailor it. Say, okay, well, whether it's healthcare or maybe financial services, tailor it more towards the industry, because there's different security needs for different industries, whether it be compliance or different vulnerabilities or certain things that they see from emerging threats.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also know security as a whole is just hard to highlight and show your work, right? So like,
Yeah.
I always think of coding's, and I could get a GitHub, I can drop that and put a link into my LinkedIn, and it's a really easy way for somebody to see my expertise and skill. Within the cyberspace, it is so much harder.
Can't really add links
other than I can
cyberspace
correct.
Because nobody's going to click on it. Security manager is not going to click on a hyperlink or anything like that in their email or in their resume. So you have to really be able to describe it. And that's where, a recruiter or, somebody in their network can kind of help them navigate how they're going to present that on paper.
Yeah. Is there any good tips or tricks? I know the skills and attributes, you can kind of add the buzzwords on the LinkedIn. I don't think people look at those very often, so I don't think it's a strong suit. But what is a good way for somebody trying to show and highlight their skills, right? Other than write it, is there any other kind of tips and tricks you would offer for skill highlighting for a LinkedIn profile?
Again, you'd have to really be able to highlight those. It's almost like you would have to prioritize the skill level based upon that specific role for that specific company. Because again, it goes back to kind of tailoring that resume for that right job description, but in an honest format. So you may prioritize certain experience for a security engineer role in healthcare differently than how you would prioritize maybe somebody in the financial industry. And again, I'm thinking of more like vulnerability management, compliance requirements and regulations that these security engineers and analysts have to be aware of, where healthcare is going to have, HIPAA and high trust regulations. But financial industries are going to have, PCI and certain terminology, GDPR or certain type of audits that affect their industry differently.
I've always given advice around like profile stuff, and I know in our kind of notes for the show today was the matching of your profile to your resume, where there should be
yes, they need to be aligned. Yes,
between those two. You want to dive into that a little bit more? Why that's important to make sure there's some alignment there?
I do. So I know in my experience from a recruiter perspective, I have sat down with hiring managers and we literally compare and make sure. Well, I do it up front from a recruiter perspective to make sure, does their LinkedIn recruiter match their resume? And I would say 90% of my hiring managers do the same thing when I'm doing my candidate presentation. So I'm already making sure before I even present a candidate, does their LinkedIn match their resume? And what that means is the dates, the titles, the descriptors. I mean, they really should mirror each other. Now, if you are working for an organization where you don't want to display it on your LinkedIn for security reasons, then put confidential, but have the matching job title and dates. You don't necessarily have to say the organization. I know a lot of security professionals do that for obvious security reasons. But what can really help an individual is making sure that they are a good replica of each other. And then also stating this was contract, or this was full time, or I left this position to move on to this next position. You know, you can use it as a story to tell. Maybe it was a reduction in force. Maybe it was COVID. Maybe it was a personal matter. So if there's a gap, you know, you can use LinkedIn or use your resume in order to tell that story as well. But you want to make sure, though, that your years match. And if you do want to get really down to the month, even if a resume says April, but the LinkedIn says June, you've just opened yourself up to questioning, and are you really telling the truth? So just even that little, even if it's a typo or an accident, or, oh, I didn't realize LinkedIn set that date. You as the candidate, you have to make sure that everything aligns. You're telling your story truthfully.
My advice, yeah. Well, my advice has always been,
I can really go down the rabbit hole on that one.
No, I try to keep. I'm a blonde. I try to keep things simple. Like we all have our highlight reels, right? Like there's three kind of career accomplishments that I think most people are generally proud of. They're like, if you take those three scenarios in your resume and LinkedIn, and you have your smart answers in mind, and you package your outcomes and results within that job description for those three highlights, every question you're asked in an interview is aligned with your LinkedIn and your resume, because it's all succinct.
Correct.
And it's all packaged in a way. And one year I might have a great year and my top three changes, but like those things help me with my personal brand.
Absolutely.
They make sure that I'm consistently in my answer, and I know that I can always give a smart answer to any question. And that part,
Absolutely.
I think, makes it much more marketable. It keeps you on track. I think that's just there's outcomes.
It does. And then, to that same note, when you are, let's say you're tailoring a resume, but you're applying to a security analyst role, one's to healthcare and one's financial. When you do tailor that resume, you're also showing to the organization, hey, I'm not just blasting my resume out. I'm targeting your position because I've got this experience that will help a healthcare industry do X, Y, and Z. But I also have this experience that can help a financial. So it's just showing that you're not just blasting your resume out to just anybody because you want a job so bad. You're really putting your thought into it. You're doing your homework and your research and being prepared for that job and for that industry in order to support them and protect them.
Yeah. So we didn't really dive into it, but LinkedIn has an incredible amount of groups and kind of subgroups and pages you could follow and newsletters that are there. I've not gotten super engaged in those things, but I know there's an incredible kind of network and community around some of these things. Have you seen much success or advice, or is there any kind of tips or tricks you would kind of recommend for those, paid groups and meetup type stuff?
Within the security community, I think really what's going to be more powerful is getting involved in those local security chapters. So whether it be like something like a B-Sides or a Cloud Security Alliance or some form of a security networking event or community. I don't know that you're necessarily going to find that on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's going to have a lot of great information just in general. But when you're really talking about a segment that is ever changing and changing by the second, you really need to be in a more of a niche group. And then also subscribing to some of these feeds or intel reports. I mean, I know the big ones are going to be like, Mandiant, CrowdStrike, I think Recorded Future. I know from my former company, Sideris, they send out these newsletters of what's happening, what they're seeing, and how to protect yourself. So being able to subscribe to something of that nature, dark reading. Actually, I've got a kind of a list here, but there's all different types of valuable intel that somebody could subscribe to on a daily or weekly basis, however they want to ingest that information. So I guess in short is you really want to get specific on what type of group that you want to keep learning about. So if it's security engineering or security analyst type work, then you definitely want to get more involved in like the dark reading, or I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought there, but you really want to get more involved in a security specific intel report and just keep reading and learning about it.
I've always been a fan. Great answer. I've always been a really big fan and encouraged many of our folks that have come through our program to find their recruiter, right? Like a recruiter is somebody who is like yourself. You've been in the sector for quite a few years. You've got endless relationships with employers. So like you're a friend and could be a friend to many people over the course. So let's say I'm breaking into it and I want to find my person, my Jessica of the world. Like, where do I go? What are some things I should look for in a trusted recruiting partner that I think is going to have my best interest in place to really help me and invest in my career? Is there some best practices there to look for? Or
yeah, that's a really good question. I think
mindful it's not LinkedIn related. Yeah, I know it's not LinkedIn related, but I know
that's
there's
a great question. And every community is going to have kind of those top voices, in their city or even state for that matter, or region. I think what you're going to find is you do want to look on LinkedIn and see who are some of those LinkedIn recruiters, or I'm sorry, those recruiters on LinkedIn that have, several thousand connections. They are also providing some insight on what's going on in the market, some data points that shows that they're well informed. Then on the other side of that, they can show that they're well informed, through their own work and their marketing efforts and all that good stuff. But I think it comes down to kind of that feeling. Is this person really listening to me? Are they really asking, okay, well, let's really explore this. If I have this role, would you be interested in that role? I mean, just because you show up and say, okay, I want to get into security. Well, you want to work with somebody who actually understands all the different areas of security, not just laser focused on one area. Because if you're a fit for one, you could be a fit for many. So you want to make sure that you're working with somebody that understands you, your needs, what's important to you, whether or not that's going to be, remote versus on site. I mean, just some of that basic information that that you're going to need. You got to make sure that recruiter is in tune with what your needs are, also in tune with what your salary expectations are, and also somebody who's also willing to check you a little bit, because you can have your great wish list, but if you don't have that recruiter that's going to level set what's actually going on in the market from a financial perspective, from a hiring perspective, you kind of want that recruiter to be able to not necessarily play maybe devil's advocate, but really educate you and check you on what's reality and what's happening in the market. Just like your friend would.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You want good you think of your recruiter as your you want them to become your best friend from a recruiting standpoint, because they're going to be your advocate.
Yeah, my brother-in-law had made a friend, a recruiter years ago for a smaller kind of boutique firm, and she's gone a couple different places, and I wound up making friends with her, and still a great person that I could tap into when I need some support. I'm not a technical person, but like I learned pretty quickly from him and watched the investment she made in his career and the opportunities she brought. Or, like it was a win-win, right? Like if
Yeah.
you want the recruiter to have that relationship, if you're a talented person, I'm going to make a reference of a silly movie with, what was it, Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis. What was it? Just
Jeez.
Friends. I don't remember what it was, but like she was a recruiter and got him a couple jobs, right? So like there are probably other parts of that movie they weren't appropriate within that, but like as they got into a relationship. However, that there was a level of just support and service that I think, or that they had a relationship. She saw a talent, and that was a win-win for both of them because
Yes,
it's, there is a compensation that's tied to that stuff. So it's
there
not it's
is.
not a bad thing. Yeah,
There's
and that's why I
there's
think it's okay to talk about it.
yeah, and the compensation piece is, from a recruiter perspective, depending upon if they're external or internal. External recruiters, they do they're going to receive a fee based upon your base salary. They should not be charging candidates up front. I still hear that practice. I've never met a recruiter that does that, but that should not. I would walk away from that person immediately if they're asking for money up front. I think that is all.
Yeah,
That's a
agreed.
thing of the past. So that is something to think about. But again, it's being able to have somebody that can really kind of showcase your efforts. So they do have to get to know you, but you also have to put your best foot forward and really showcase your talents and excitement and integrity throughout the process as well. So if somebody's going to be working with you and helping you navigate your career, then you've got to be responsive. You have to be timely. You have to do your part. You have to do your homework and certainly be presentable and prepared for all of the things that the recruiter is going to navigate with you.
Yeah, that's great advice. So we've hit the end. It goes fast. It always does. And everybody gets the same last question. And we've covered a lot of good advice here about leveling up careers, but any kind of final thoughts of what advice you would give to somebody to look into level up their cybersecurity career?
Yeah. So if you want to level up your cybersecurity career, you really have to think about that you are really selling yourself. So what that means is, in the world of sales, there's so many, prospect touches, let's say, or so many times that you're going to reach out to folks. Keep going, even if it takes 10 times. It's going to show your discipline and your enthusiasm that you really want this opportunity. And if you're showing that you're going to keep, striving, even though maybe it's been crickets, I think that goes a long way. So again, it's finding out who those folks are on LinkedIn that are going to help you navigate your career, maybe through mentor, recruitment, or the hiring manager for that role. And so, you got to really think about that. You're really got to be able to sell yourself, and working with somebody like a recruiter or somebody in that field can certainly help you improve your ability to brag about yourself. Some people love to brag about themselves, and I would say most don't.
Yeah, nobody likes to really talk about themselves. So I get that. It makes a ton of sense. But
yeah.
Man, that was a great conversation. I think that the listeners today will take a lot of out of that. And I think some really great advice. LinkedIn is an incredible tool. It has a ton of capacity, whether I want a job or I'm trying to sell things, right? Like there's
Sure.
it's a huge network that's out there that provides a lot of opportunity. And I think the tips and tricks you kind of shared today is a great way to set a minimum, be operating efficiently, and probably hit some of those end goals you do. And if you don't feel like you know it, LinkedIn Learning is also a great resource, and a lot of it is free. So hop in and don't sleep on the classes that are there. And you can collect a ton of digital badges and micro credentialing through it.
And don't sleep on the boot camps that are out there and the programs that can help you, increase your skills and knowledge.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for your time today and for the information you shared with everybody. It was a pleasure getting to hear all of that. And I want to say thank you to our listeners as always. And I'd be remiss not to say happy holidays. So thank you all so much for listening and tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you soon.
Okay. See ya. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Okay.